and possibly having a resolution in support or against this city yes housing opportunity. So what I propose is we'll go through the various points of the city of yes or housing. We can go through these questions, the questions, if need be. People have not read them. Kelly has something that you can go through that. And then we can go through the draft resolution that Richard drafted. Okay.
I just have one question, please.
Sure.
As I understand it, I perhaps it's going to just review. We have several days and more days to be able to deliberate because we are having another full board. If we do not have a full resolution tonight, we could continue and either have a committee or have revisions coming back because we are not violating any of the.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's important for us to know because it's so complicated. We have to be able to do what we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So the timeline is tomorrow they're coming out with the.
I'll say something nicely.
Pardon? Yeah, tomorrow they're coming out with the I think it's the overall plan and budget, right? And then on the 10th, which is Monday, is the full proposal. And then we have 2 weeks. We have until June 24th is when we have to comment on this. The city plan.
Right, so I'm just saying there's that many days.
With our full board meeting on June 18th.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right, and on June 20th, there is a borough board meeting where I will be asked to opine on whatever we have agreed to.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Could I just comment on your proposal and how we talk about it? Obviously, we do need to talk about the individual components that we have, and our views may vary and they may change over the course of the evening. But I think in doing that, we should all remember the overall context of what this, how it's been labeled, what their premises are, how it applies, how we believe it would apply or affect CB7, and really try to concentrate most of our thoughts and what we would plan to write.
I can't hear these people. I need my hearing aids
Where are they? I'll get them.
in the bathroom.
Okay.
What did I?
Louder.
No, it's not.
Tell you what, with Richard not in the room, I'll take off my mask. I just hope I didn't get it from you last week, Richard.
I was going to put on my mask, just out of excess of caution, but I found out about an hour ago that I'm negative now. So the bout is over.
On the city of yes housing opportunities, or is it how you feel?
May I just ask a very quick question to people who are, or make a request. If you're on Zoom and you're not speaking, can you mute yourselves until you're to speak? Because every little they do or whisper is heard in this room. And as entertaining as it is, it's distracting.
May I add a similar
I
comment?
couldn't hear it either. If I sat there, I couldn't hear.
On several of these meetings, we have to really insist upon one person speaking at a time in this room through raised hands or whatever technique that the chair wishes to invoke. Because if you have two people speaking, there is nothing heard by our members of the public.
So we'll raise hands and I'll recognize speakers and then people can speak. That's how we'll proceed. Okay. All right. So let's begin. So. The first element of the proposal is the UAP, which is the Universal Affordability Preference. So I'll just read what it says. In recent decades, high demand neighborhoods have lost affordable housing and become increasingly out of reach to working families. The Universal Affordability Preference is a new tool that would allow buildings to add at least 20% more housing if the additional homes are affordable to households earning 60% of the area median income. As a result, they will deliver new affordable housing in high-cost neighborhoods across New York City to working families. As an example of how the policy would work, take a proposal for a 100% affordable building in a high-cost neighborhood in Manhattan, like the Upper West Side. Under the UAP, the building can be built with at least 20% more space, so long as it uses that extra space for affordable housing. Okay, so. Go ahead.
So there are a couple of things. First of all, this is voluntary. It is not mandatory. Nowhere in this document is there any mandatory affordable housing, and this is the only portion of it that even mentions affordable housing as such. It seems to me,
Louisa, could you speak up a little bit?
I'm sorry, okay.
No, it's harder on this one. Thank you.
Okay. And they were very proud of the fact that it goes across the board, but in something like an R8B district, of which we have many, these are our brownstone districts. And using UAP, we would go up from an FAR of 6 to 7.2. It's an increase of about 20%, which really is quite high in the middle of these districts that we want to protect and save, and which will not actually give that many affordable units anyway. I was wondering why they didn't retain quality housing in the contextual districts. I mean, that seemed to me an easy way to do it, and they just did not. The other really big thing is 485X, which replaced 421A, is not applicable to condos and co-ops in Manhattan. And virtually all of our buildings are condos.
Can I respond to that, or how we do it? Sorry, I'm late.
No.
Sorry.
Not till you're called on.
Okay.
And there are other ways to get to an additional 20% scattered throughout. They don't have affordable housing attached to them, as this one does. But no developer has to do it. And if you read through the text about what HPD requires, I think most developers are not going to want to do this. It's very, very stringent. Also, there's a lot of things about this that it says, I did read the text, most of it. Such building has to be income restricted and occupied by an eligible household as established by such agreement, the Affordable Housing Regulatory Agreement, for a period of no less than 30 years. This is supposed to be permanent. There are all these little curiosities, anomalies in it that, you know, I really would want to know more about. And and they talk about the distribution. The distribution is terrific. Spread throughout the building, 65%. The apartments have to be the same as the market rate apartments, etc. But not the benefit. However, they should not apply if all affordable housing units are rental affordable housing and all other dwelling units are home ownership. I could not figure that out. So in other words, if you have a condo and they put rental units throughout, and it can be done, you know, it's just a matter of bookkeeping. They're saying you can't do it. 2716. So I think that it wasn't thought out all the way through. I spoke to somebody who wrote this actually at city planning. And he said that they were not responsible for the HPD stuff. It just went in like that, and there's a lot of problems with it.
Pass the buck.
So just on one of your points,
Mhm.
this board in 2007, after 2.5 years of work, Ethel's leadership on the task force brought rezoning, largest rezoning in the history of New York City, 97th Street to 110th Street. And for multiple reasons, but especially maintaining the built environment that we have. 8B, REB became the mid-block zoning, okay? This is taking that away. When you have brownstones and they expand in number of cases already in the district, doesn't mean there are going to be more housing units. Very often we have people with 3 or 4 apartments in their brownstones. They wanted to make it into their apartment. So there's no guarantee that that will have any positive effect on housing for people. So a combination of that's the way our built environment has been, and it's been, I think, good. It also, up where from 97 up, we did it because air rights were being transferred. It was a RA district from building to building and over buildings, but we have different zoning designations, RA, RB, you cannot transfer those. The only other quick thing is there's very little input on community on any of this.
Excellent.
Okay, so picking up on what Louisa and Shelley have said, and I admire Louisa for having read the text and the homework that she's done, and for her background in this, and Shelley's particularly in the not-for-profit end of things. But number one, I'm not sure what document of theirs you were reading from Tibita, but I made the overall point that the slides we were presented with, the oral presentation, left out so much that's important to us. And that we really need, I think, to focus our attention on what we in MCB7 care about and what any of this would do for or against us. Just to expand for a minute, I would be, well, first of all, I think we ought to say for CB7 with regard to this, no. And without necessarily addressing what it would do in any other part of the city. In part because I think, and we'll get to all of this, I don't know whether everybody will agree, overall, there's a number of things that are so bad for us in this that I would not want to suggest an imprimatur on the whole thing, even with all of our, various negative comments, but just on this one now, picking up on what they said, I think it's fairly clear, we've been talking about this for a couple of meetings now, that because of the nature of our market, in our district and historically what's been built, realistically, we would not be seeing any affordable housing out of this, in part because, as Louisa said, the financing that's available through 454, whatever that's called, the state is not available for co-ops and condominiums, in part because I think, as Paige explained once, the higher you go, the bigger your building, the more your relative costs to build a building. And it also that a developer, even only of a rental building, that could be could obtain that financing. Generally, and the history in our district is certainly this, is not going to look kindly in general on adding space with a different category of tenants that may have, rightly or wrongly, a negative impact on the market appeal to the market rate tenants. So all told, where the central title on this thing is City of Yes, Affordable Housing, from the point of view of our district, we're not going to get it. And we may well, as others have explained, see some disadvantages as well. So I've said it.
Do you think that we would get more market rate housing?
I think we'll always get more market rate housing. You know, as Louisa also said, it's obvious, there's no mandatory affordable housing in this anyway. The market determines, you go through some 5 years, 10-year periods where you get a lot more market rate housing. Then you have a bit of a, oops, we can't sell these things or we can't rent these things. And then overall, the cycle in New York goes up and up and up. And we've seen that over all of our lifetimes. We saw it, well, you saw it even with the super talls. There was a while when apparently they weren't selling well, but then they started selling again. And I don't know that there's anybody in this room rich enough to buy any of those apartments. So yeah, I mean, it cycles over the years, but it's something I've always said in my many years on CB7 is New York is really about two things. It's about finance, but it's about real estate. We don't have enough of it. We want to build up, we want to make money. And overall, over the years, it's up and up and up. And less affordable.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to start by saying as an overarching comment, I would just hate to see this board go on record as a no. I think it's really important to signal our values that we want more affordability and more housing in our district. And I feel strongly that a yes with conditions where we list our issues with it would send the right message of where we are on housing while still communicating our reservations. So that's just sort of an overarching comment. And on the UAP stuff, especially, I know there's some hesitancy over the idea of adding density, especially given the really important work that was done to rezone the other part of the district. But I do think that, you know, our decisions on land use should be reflective of the moment we're in. And the moment we're in is that of a housing crisis. So if giving up a little bit of that contextuality is a trade-off to create opportunity for housing, for me, that's something I'm willing to live with for what seems to be a fairly moderate, I know 20% may not be moderate to everyone, change or addition in density. On the condo versus rental question in 485X, I will say that I think part of the reason we had such a glut of condo development was a symptom of the lack of 421A replacement program. So we can't really predict what development will be going forward. Like, yes, we're in a very high land value district, but we have to see how this incentive plays out. And I think creating that opportunity by allowing UAP, we have a chance to see some affordable housing. And I'll also add on the condo question, we had such a glut in the market, like you're saying, Klari, of condo development that I don't think there is much of an appetite to keep creating it because there's a lot sitting on the market right now. So I do think there is a chance we could see some effects of UAP in terms of creating floor area in our district. So I missed the beginning of this granted, so as more comments come up. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I think really the comments, several of them are very important indeed, and I believe that but I think there are several points that need to be made for Manhattan, for our area, which may dictate us saying yes overall, but no, based on some very detailed comments that in fact affect us. And I'll give you some of them. I'm going to start quickly with one that doesn't seem to have to do with skyscrapers or big buildings, but as one example, when Shelley said that when we worked like hell to rezone 96 to 110th Street, which was because we were expecting and frightened that the way the zoning would, the way it was going to go, and even the potential market, that it was going to be even more of so-called Lincoln Center, or which is nothing wrong with it, but only tall buildings. Other things, I'll start with the fact that what this does is very negative for the brownstone blocks, the tenements, the relationship of one block to another, backyards. For example, it does decrease the perimeter, the amount of backyards by, from 50 feet to 30 feet. I may not have it exactly correct. It
30,
also.
30.
Yeah, I'm sorry, sorry. I'm also a little bit hoarse, and please forgive me. And also there are 5 or 6, which I do have the listing, and 5 or 6 items that substantively, materially, seriously change the mid-blocks, in distance between buildings, in what can be demolished and built higher in those buildings, the relationship of side yards, because they are reducing that. That whole thing, I think, needs clear analysis and saying no to that, because that will affect our area considerably. Secondly, and I'll be as quickly as I can with maybe just reinforcing, but a couple of newer things. I'm not sure. I know that, as Klari says, that it may, development goes in waves and so on. That's true, but zoning, with all its faults, we know, and the fact that it's so huge and it's taken so long. Zoning, I'm sorry, was invented in New York in 1916, and I do this, I sort of know, but also in those times, there was such a concern of, wait a minute, this big building is casting shadows on the one that I am about to build across the street. So may I say to you, the zoning that started in 1916 was a reaction in the market, that the market needs certain kinds of regulation, and above all, it needs sunshine, it needs space between buildings, it needs special rules for streets and so on. Now, the 1961, which is the one that they're really coping with now, because the 1961 was the one that reacted all those years later to suburbs, to cars, to highways, and many other things that we know about, and that is of great concern now. So what happens here too much is that there is too much reliance on the market in all of this, and not enough incentive for regulation, and, excuse me, for good planning and for good relationships and health among buildings and in districts. The other 1 or 2 things, and I'll stop there, is also we have been, it seems to us on the Upper West Side, we've been, there's building all the time. We see it occurring, so we're in a good position. There is nothing in this at all in an area where much of the building and the market is dictating condos for anything that has to do with what? Affordable housing. Those who find condos, it's relying on the market too much here, and that is affecting us and should not, and we should be able to make recommendations to say no to some of that, to provide other examples, because we do want to see affordable housing. Condos are never going to do it. One other point, several of the buildings that we have seen go up in the last year's tall ones, there are examples that what happened there is there was a demolition of, let's say, 8 brownstones, so let's say 40 units, and then a big building went up, and that building then provides for 20 apartments because they have to be very big, and there's no incentive for affordable. There is, at least in that area, of that particular way of building a city, less regard that there should be for the important things of light and air and variety and change and affordability, and above all, making a variety and encouraging incentives for affordable housing. It stunned me that there's so little of hard stuff to really encourage affordable housing. I know that, and my very last is, I'm very concerned about what this potentially does for our NYCHA housing in many ways. That's going to be devastating in filling in that everything that's in there would encourage and permit the filling in of the open spaces in the campus housing with, in the details of it, with very few really regulations on how big they should see, and it will be cut out. And we have Douglas houses and even Park West Village and all of them where I have read, at least, and it's not speculation, that there could be hundreds of houses building in those areas. Now, don't we want more housing? So what's so terrible about that, Ethel? But you know what? It's all going to be filled in with less open space, and it's going to be something that without the kinds of needs of zoning and other things. So that's part of it. I'll stop you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to agree and underscore with Melissa's point about the need to do this with a scalpel rather than with a blunt, blunt instrument, because I think there is so much of this that would be of real help in encouraging building of housing, certainly in the outer boroughs and in other low density areas of the city. And I just wanted to make the point that increasing the production of housing in the outer boroughs would have a real economic effect on us, because what it would do would be to place downward pressure on the rents that folks in our neighborhood face. And therefore, this is part of our real interest, not just to say citywide no, but perhaps there are some things that don't work in our district, but that we view as in our economic interest of our neighbors. And so I wanted to make that point. Also, in the response we got back from city planning yesterday around the 30-foot rear and the side face, they did make the statement that the side, the changes to space on the side of the building did not apply anywhere in our district. I just wanted that to be clear. They did not say the same thing about backyards. And I know that in our prior meeting, the notion of the donut hole was prominent in terms of something that we wish to see preserved. There's a way to carve that out perhaps and say that, but if we don't need to take on the side access piece, the vast bulk of our district is basically street wall. There are no. The thing about NYCHA that I'm still not too clear on is their representation here that the way in which they defined infill is contextual, so that it is related to the height and placement of the existing buildings within the complex. And while there may be no direct affordability requirement on that, there is clearly a process through which NYCHA residents participate in these decisions that seems to me have meant that until now, there has not been, except in one very rare instance where the money from market rate housing, as you pointed out, would help pay for the maintenance and repair of the existing facilities that the tenants have agreed to it. So there are other fail-safes here. around that type of issue.
I'm new and I don't know. So my question is, when they built the NYCHA houses and they had great open space, wasn't that in part to create a safe environment for the people who are gonna live there? And then this plan takes away that space. What does that do to the dynamic of the housing? And the original thought that it was necessary to have places for people to sit, talk, and hang out.
It's a good question. In the case of the Elliott houses, where they are going to build new housing, new affordable, housing projects, for the low income tenants, but then also add market rate housing, on the same campus. The tenants voted for that. So there was
Still,
there was a vote, and it was either we can renovate, while you're in what's called in place renovation, right? Or we can build new units, and in that case, the tenants voted for it. So now in Chelsea, the market rate is very high, so that pays for a lot of the affordable housing, right? Now in other neighborhoods, somewhere out in Queens, so that's feasible.
right, but that's not answering the question. The question is, if it was necessary or thought to be environmentally necessary and planning necessary to give space in these very tall, low-income buildings. What's the thought? What's the planning to say we don't need it anymore?
For the most part, I would say in 95% of the cases, they are just renovating the existing buildings and leaving the space as it is.
Not on the upper side in terms of the plans for on several, because they have come out with Douglas houses and others.
Yeah, that's correct. Those were not separate, but for the most part,
But
when
they're
they
in our
renovate,
neighborhood
huh?
also, so we have to think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to quickly this time, Ethel and Beverly referred to the 30-foot rear yard requirement going to 20. I did not understand that to be part of this particular thing that we're talking about. I think several of us will have something to say about that. But the only thing I want to say about it right now is it's the most prime example of what we weren't told, wasn't in the presentation. We only learned it from George James, and I'll say on that, I hope there's nobody here who has not watched George James's presentation on City of Yes housing opportunity, because boy, I learned a lot. Those of us who watched it. Second, though, with regard to Melissa's first point, and then I have one other thing. We all have said for several years that affordable housing is our top priority. I think no matter what we say, we can start out by saying, we have said for several years that affordable housing is our top priority. It still is. But as applied to CB7, this City of Yes, whatever negatives it may have, we'll talk about that, doesn't do that for us. So we can maintain our general support without overall saying, oh yeah, we're signing on to this because it's got the label affordable housing. I had one final thing, which I've now forgotten, but it was, forgotten. Never mind, I'll get back to it.
I think Ira had a sentence.
Yeah, I'm gonna say a couple of things that are not really popular at this stage. My apologies. Some of these have been in conversations with some of the people at this table several years ago, but in reality, with any of this stuff, it's a three-legged stool. We have good planning, we have good design, and we have affordability. It's a three-legged stool. And you gotta balance, and that's the problem. And each, you can vary, and the stool can be like this, like that, but you can't pull one leg out. Okay. The reality of it is that we're not the only place on the Upper West Side that had public land 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I think it's the third site, but I can't remember the third site. With 108th Street and the IRT substation. The only way we're gonna get anything, and the IRT got us 50% affordable, 108th Street got us 100% affordable. There is no more public land. The public land that's left on the Upper West Side to build on, if we want any substantial affordable housing, rather than 10% here, 20% here kind of thing, is a really unpopular option, which is schoolyards. We had an educational construction fund proposal for 2 of our schoolyards, which would make NYCHA infill look popular. Okay, I don't know if anybody remembers the first election for Helen Rosenthal. Those 2 schools were a big bone of contention. Nobody even wanted, you know, ECF pulled those before they even got to the proposal phase.
And what?
199 and 191. Okay. NYCHA is the other place where we have public land. There are two versions of NYCHA. One is, well, there are 3 versions. One is the infill that was illustrated by George James, and obviously I don't think there's anybody but would even think about that in 1,000 years. His illustrations are, I think, a little overdone, but I will have to admit, and I'm going to do this a little self-deprecating. One of the illustrations he did was actually my project. It actually went in as a NYCHA RFP, and I said it was awful within the office while it was happening, and thankfully everybody else agreed. But it's really hard to. But that goes back to my 3-legged stool. That was very, very heavy. It was 100% senior housing, overwhelmingly affordable. Very good idea. It was going to produce a lot of family housing by drawing low occupancy units within I-6. It was going to bring them in. Okay, it was twice the height of any other building in I-6, so it was really kind of, and it cast a shadow and so forth and so forth. And I argued long against it, but as a matter of economics, both in terms of the construction costs and in terms of some other issues. So it went in, got rejected. Great, I'm all for that getting rejected. I felt very weird to see myself on screen. But there are a couple other ways of doing this. There have been a number of studies done of how to do low density within NYCHA campuses. And those need to be what needs to be delineated as to how to do that. And you can do that around the edges. You can sometimes do it in the middle. It's very touchy as how you do that, but you need an architect that knows what they're doing. You need a planner who knows what they're doing. And this is what they've got on the desk right now is 100-pound pile driver, not a little tack hammer. Okay, so the last place is the parking lots. And if we're going to exclude the parking lots, then we have no place to build 100% affordable housing or even 80% affordable housing. So we have to be real about this. Do we want affordable housing or not? And if we do, you know what? I don't think there's a private for-profit developer that's going to do it. Is there a church that's going to do it? Maybe. But I've done, you know, a lot of the churches, at least in the outer boroughs, have done studies, and most of them have found it doesn't work for them because at the end of the day, they can't get the space they need, and they find out in the whole thing they actually can't get any space for their members anyway, the mechanisms. So we've got to figure out how to actually come up with something that's realizable. Otherwise, we're not going to produce nothing. And I'm going to give one last bit to my rant here, is that when we did 108th Street, the mayor came to some meetings. And he came to some meetings, not because he loved the Upper West Side, and not because he loved our council member, but he figured that if he couldn't get this built on the Upper West Side, he wasn't going to get built anywhere in the city. What? De Blasio.
Of course.
Okay, and he got us to build it. So if we can't show that we've got some interest in doing some of this, I don't think anybody's going to listen. It's terribly much to us because they're going to spend their time making the people who want parking in the rest of the city happy. Enough about my rant.
I'll call out myself. I'll make 2 points. One, I agree. affordable housing over parking. Like providing housing for people with low incomes is more important than having people park their private property on public property. Number two, I think that we have to realize that building market rate housing brings down the price of all housing, even affordable housing, right? It just is supply and demand. It just does. So it's not just only building, housing under 80% AMI or 60% AMI. If you can just build more market rate house, then the people who can afford it go live in those houses and they don't bid up the prices of, the other units.
This is trickle down.
Can we have one person to speak before someone speaks twice? And speak to the topic, which is only the first item on the resolution. We've been talking about everything but.
Okay.
You had another point.
No, I'm not.
Has anyone not, I've not spoken yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mark and I both have our hands up, so whenever that chance.
I agree that we should try and stick the first point before we start moving on to all the other points, or we're never gonna get through the agenda. I have an overarching point, which I think follows on Melissa Tibita. And it is this. It's city of yes for housing opportunity. It's not city of yes for affordable housing opportunity. And that is, I think, the point you're making. We have a housing crisis in the city. It's not just an affordable housing crisis, although that is dire, but it's a housing crisis. There's no more housing stock here in our district. And as Beverly pointed out, also following on Beverly, if we can release some pressure throughout the city, our district will benefit as well, I feel. Now, I think if we get caught up, the enemy, the perfect is the enemy of the good, that old expression, I get Ben Franklin or somebody like that, Shakespeare, I don't know. And I think Toni Morrison, but I don't think so. But if we get caught up in the minutia, then I worry we'll vote against what is a good proposal for housing, when we all want a perfect proposal for whatever reason we may have put forth at the beginning of this meeting. The last thing I'll say is, at our last meeting a month ago, a lot of young people in our district stood before us and begged us, and I mean begged us, to help them live here. And some of them were people who grew up here. Their parents raised them here, and they want to keep living here, but they can't afford to live here. And so they are asking us to vote yes, because they want to be with their parents, be with their grandparents, live in the community that we are supposed to be serving. So I'm trying to approach this with empathy rather than with too much technocratic ear. And so that's my overarching.
May I just
comment
correct
that I
one
want.
thing instead? Yeah, just one sentence.
I had more, but
They
I'm trying to.
did not ask for us to approve this. They wanted middle income housing,
Well,
which is
maybe-
not in
maybe-
this program.
Maybe we heard different.
Okay,
We agree on everything.
Everything else, of course.
I heard
Okay.
something different.
Brad, please go ahead. It's Brad. Mark, sorry, Mark. I'm sorry, Mark, please go ahead.
I think Richard was first, so maybe we should hear
I
from
don't,
him first.
go ahead, Mark, as long as you.
Okay, thank you. I have more of a scope comment than I have specific ones for you. My scope is, the context of this is a citywide rezoning, and it is creating additional as of right development opportunities that eliminate the need for our board to participate in the ability of our board to opine on any of the projects that would be built under it. And so I am deeply concerned by the removal of our oversight and our ability to be advisory on these matters. With that, I am also deeply concerned by the creation of an as of right solution that does not guarantee either affordable or unaffordable housing in our district. It certainly doesn't. The only thing that even mentions affordable housing is the UAP, and because ordinarily 1-for-1 bonus for every square inch of affordable housing that you create sounds like a good idea. But unless you're a developer who's trying to push the penthouse up the sky, why would you incur the additional costs simply to break even on that? That doesn't strike me. It was a failed effort it was a failed program for senior housing that they've now repurposed or repackaged as affordable housing. And I don't think it'll have any greater effect there. My other scope, I share your concerns about infill development. I won't repeat what others have said. I am particularly concerned about the elimination of the sliver law. I think that is something that will have a negative effect on a lot of things that we've been talking about. But I guess the thing that I wanted to add in terms of focus, and perhaps respectfully disagreeing with some of my colleagues, is that voting no doesn't mean we oppose what the young people who came to your meeting asked for. Voting no in this context empowers our city council members to negotiate from a position of strength for concessions that are not in this plan yet. And so for example, the elimination of some of these rear yards and so forth, I would be willing to give that up if we got affordable housing in the mix. I want to empower Gail and Sean and anybody else who cares what we think to negotiate from that position of strength. So strategically, I think a no answer is not an abdication of our responsibility, but rather taking quite seriously the job that we were given as community board members to protect the interests of our group and to make sure that our core values are reflected in the ultimate, some version of this is going to pass, but the details about whether or not affordability is in any way is a word that's mentioned in the document is something that we can affect, I believe, by an overall vote of no with a lot of specifics attached to it. I have more specific things, and perhaps I'll raise my hand again when the conversation continues, but I wanted to offer that as a framing mention, and thank you, Richard, for the courtesy.
It's worth the wait. To some extent, I agree with Mark, but let me focus on the first point, which is the only point we're supposed to be talking about. I think it is unlikely that this is going to produce a great deal of affordable housing in Community Board 7. The UAP proposal, which requires 20% of additional units in the same type and spread throughout the building as the market rate units, it is a non-starter for any developer of any R10 building anywhere in the city. And I think we should, I don't oppose it, but I think we should point out that we think it's unrealistic and that we might be better off leaving the voluntary inclusionary housing provisions, at least for R10 buildings. The second point that I want to make about this is that the requirement for the UAP to build within the site that's getting the extra FAR, I think can be stifling. And I think it works against the community's advantage. I would much prefer to see a possibility of off-site application of affordable housing to preserve existing housing. And I would probably be interested in increasing the percentage to 30% of the FAR of the building as an exchange. Otherwise, I think this is a decent proposal. It's not perfect, But I think it would be, I agree with Beverly and Melissa. I think it would be a bad signal for us to reject it completely out of hand. We can express some reservations about it, but to me, the trade-off, if it worked, if we got 20% affordable housing in exchange for 20% increase in FAR, if that were a given, I would be all for it. And as a possibility, and if we don't, no harm, no foul.
If I may, for Richard, I just want to comment on Richard.
Okay.
I just want to pick up on what Richard has been saying. We may not come to the same conclusion, but I value what he is saying. And though I almost always agree with Mark, I'm not so sure that the thing to do here is a complete no. What I do know is that community boards, or at least our experience in Board 7, get or are respected and often can become and are good negotiators, good bargainers, whatever way it is, because we know community boards don't have a lot of power, but they have some. And that is, if we develop, we think this and this and this will not work. We think that it is not going to work in Board 7, and it is essential for that to be changed and modified. And here are the ways that it should be. And in other ways, we say such and such is good, but it's better. Then we will have a better chance in the next 3 or 4 or 5 months to really, to believe it or not, to negotiate, because the city wants, it's going to go on for the next 4 or 5 months, and they want to be able to get a victory. That doesn't mean that we have to say yes to everything. We should be able to select. I mean, we got to know how to do this in our not very strong, but critical part of the process. And remember that this is going to go to the council, so we got months, and we can work on some of this to bring together and say, this we need. The very last thing is, there's too much at this point that I see, at least, too much giving weight to the market, that the market's going to do it. And we will, by the way, do some affordable and so on. I really feel too much of that. I want to see that the market is not the sole driver, giving I heard this with a lawyer, get some of our good lawyers around, they are opening and saying, man, this is going to give us a lot of work, but that's okay. We want market and we want the negotiation.
Okay, I'll say 2 things. One is the city is not going to build any housing, affordable or not affordable.
I know that.
The federal government stopped funding public housing in 1998. The
Yes,
state is also not going to build any
yeah,
housing. So the market is the only way that housing.
but
is going
not
to be done.
undiluted.
On the agenda tonight is another item, which if we ever get through this one, maybe we can consider. Which is to support a set of initiatives before the council. And that the council is trying to conclude into the adopted budget of the city due at the end of this month. That requires an additional $500 million per year in capital funding to HPD for neighborhood pillars and open door programs that are designed to preserve underutilized and deteriorated housing and have it available for nonprofit use to provide affordable housing, and open door is likewise to use open space in the same way. So on the question of whether or not we have to rely entirely on zoning and in the market for affordability, that may not be the case. If the city gets back, as it once was, in a major way in the funding of affordable housing, this district could really benefit a great deal. So I just want, we don't know that that's gonna get passed, but it's there.
That's a fair point.
Just quickly, the city is funding affordable housing in this district. And it will continue. The federal, state, city government right now are funding 108th Street, 85 units of senior housing, 100% affordable. And on 85th Street, between West End and Riverside, rehabbing and redesigning for a similar amount of senior housing. So the money being in the field, not for profit field, with housing, we get money from all over the place, okay? And who gives it? We get our elected officials, we go to them, we say, this is what we're doing. And they fight for the money when they do budget negotiations. So maybe that there are some programs,
Yeah.
but
Not
that's not the
substantial.
same amount.
You're right.
enough.
Well, you're right.
I mean, what we need is other than senior housing, people like senior housing.
I agree, there's a lot more needed, and we need middle income housing.
Okay, let's go on to the
This
next.
is about to do it.
Okay, they make a decision, take a stab at a consensus statement on UAP. On UAP.
I think,
Before
please
we
allow
move
me
on.
to say one more thing.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I think Mark was well spoken, I agree with him, but just, I remember the other thing I was gonna say before. In terms of Beverly saying we should use a scalpel, I think that's exactly right, but the more we talk about this, the more I think the scalpel is, what does this do for or against CB7? And leaving the generalities of what it can do for anywhere else, not the subject of our focus. The other thing I just wanted to say is I do not buy this argument, which is a premise of the whole thing, and which is premise that several people have recited tonight, that the equivalent of a rising tide raises all boats. That is, that affordable housing, where somebody's building, a lot of people are building back little cottages in their place in Queens, is gonna lower rents in any significant way, or for that matter, condo prices, co-op prices in any significant way in the Upper West Side, again, with the focus on us. I don't know what the numbers are, but let's say that our current average studio apartment rental is $3,000 a month. So what? So you build these things in Queens and in the Bronx, and the rising tide lowers that to $2,900 a month or $2,800 a month. Still not affordable, when all of our focus should be, are we going to get affordable housing in our district? We desperately want it. This isn't gonna do it.
Or in general.
I haven't been able to speak tonight.
Go ahead.
Please, if I'm allowed to.
Go ahead.
I firstly have a ton of research from the Berman Center at NYU about how building more housing reduces prices. And I can say as someone who is been looking for housing in the past few years, it's really hard to find housing. There aren't a lot of units. The result is there's bidding wars. There's people fighting to get in. They have to show more and more income. So I would say if there is research, we can send it out, we can circulate it, like there is concrete research and saying, well, I don't know, there's research, we can talk about the research. But what I would say is, I agree with a lot of what's been said. I'm in support of it. I agree that not everything's perfect, and I think we should draw attention to that as opposed to arguing. I would say something else that's important is, I think we're kind of conflating two ideas. We're talking about low income housing and middle income housing, kind of bringing them together in ways that makes it diluted. I agree we need to build low income housing. I also agree there is not enough funding for it. And this is cynical, but as someone who is in her 30s, I do not think there will be more funding in the future. I think it's dead. And so I'm very cynical to that point. And it's wonderful that there is some housing funding going on, but I don't think there's going to be enough in the future. And so as a result, unfortunately, we're going to have to rely on the market. I don't really like supporting developers. That's not where I want developers to be making money, but at this point, the only people building housing in New York at substantial scale are developers, or private developers. I've worked with faith-based organizations in the past to design and build housing, and it can be successful, and there's these wonderful one-off moments where it happens. But at the end of the day,
developers are building housing and no one else really is at a scale. And that's sad, and I wish it wasn't that way, but that's the way economics and social policy happen right now in the United States, and I would love for them to change. That's a much larger issue. I think what I would say though is we are conflating these two ideas. Low-income housing is an important question, and we have these discussions about nitrogen. I think they're really important, and let's discuss them. But in terms of middle income, like I would qualify myself as a middle income person. The best way for me to have more affordable housing as someone who is middle income is for there to be more housing. That's the program that helps me. Maybe that's selfish, but I think as someone who wants more housing built all around, that could be very helpful for people like me, people who are starting out in the city. So what I would say is, I think it's really important that we ask these questions. They're really important questions. People are raising really great points that we should put in and we should discuss. But I think, and I agree with a lot of our board members here tonight, that we need to start with, we're excited about this. Yes, we want affordable housing. Yes, we want more middle income housing. Now let's get into the details of it, because I think otherwise we're going to be stuck here talking about all the negatives, which I understand it's not perfect. I don't really love an idea where we support developers in some ways, but I don't really see housing being built at a large scale otherwise in the city right now. And I think the ways that we can support it and also be critical and bring those ideas to the council is the best way we can support that. So that's my thing.
Thank you.
Great.
So I think we should go with the Beverly's idea of, let's try and come up with a statement about UAP. Who would like to take a stab at it? Beverly?
I'm not on the committee.
Cowley, you, I think we're delighted.
So, I mean,
Okay, well, I'm to be there. Would you mind? I put some stuff down, I'll look and see if I can put anything worthwhile. Or maybe Richard. Okay, well, the one thing we want to say, go ahead,
Should we go off of his resolution?
is that,
I think
what's that?
Should we go off with his resolution?
It's very hard for those of us on remote to understand what's going on at this moment.
okay. Yeah, let me read what Richard said about the UAP.
Could we maybe put it on the screen as well?
Is that Max, is that possible?
Yes, it'll take me.
Okay. Yep, the first one.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Good, Tibita, it's on page 3 is the resolution part.
Yep, I have it right, or I have it right there in front of me.
All right.
Okay.
Further down.
You have to. Sorry,
There you go.
it's not
Yeah.
the pages, sorry.
Right there.
Yep. Okay, so then
That's just a description. If you go to the statement of Seema, is on the next page.
My screen is.
CB7 approval.
CB7.
Yeah.
In general, CB approves the
here
proposed
it is.
amendment insofar as it is intended to increase the supply of affordable housing in the district. However, CB7 recommends that the UAP scheme be modified to allow for affordable housing credits to be awarded where the developer preserves existing affordable units within the district. Off-site affordable housing preservation should equal at least 30% of on-site market rate units. And then it goes on to say proposals for small and shared apartments.
That's
Next.
All right, that's next, okay. Yeah, so that's the statement. I mean, I think that pretty much reflects.
No, I don't think it does. I mean, sorry.
Maybe we should add something to say that. We want provisions that would require affordable housing as opposed to just incentivize it,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Is that-
Mandatory. Yep.
Not what you. Yeah. So, well.
Well,
But it
that's our comment then, right? Is that we want UAP to be something.
If it was blah, 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 then it would be good, that's not UAP. I'm just.
No, yeah, but we're saying we're modifying it in the way you did. To make it strengthen it and change the. word. So you have to try that.
I mean. I'm just saying what I'm hearing, that's not my, it's not my personal opinion. Right, but that seems to be, the somewhat of a consensus.
Mandatory.
Yeah, right, mandatory rather than just an incentive. Right,
Yeah.
remember?
We've also talked about perhaps outside of the core, outside of high density districts in New York, this might produce significant affordable housing. I think we could say that,
Yeah,
but we could say that as written, it does not do so
in our district. Yeah, I think that's a good, okay.
I like Richard's idea about if you're going to do offsite, then it must be at least 30% of on-site market rate.
I don't understand. We should have added.
Discuss.
It's on the screen.
But it,
Oh, I see, I'm sorry.
it's on page 2, 3.
instead of 20% of additional housing.
You shoot 30%, 30%.
Yeah,
If it's offsite.
gotcha.
But what is it? There's
Okay. Two things. The word unit, I know dwelling unit, but the problem is it if we have 33 bedrooms over here, do we provide 10 over here? Is it equal units? Not just units, but unit.
Comparable,
Same.
how about comparable?
Floor area.
Units of equal floor area.
Floor area, although the developer gets a better deal, but that's against that.
So actually gets more units for the same amount of floor area. Which wouldn't be a bad thing.
Right.
It actually creates a possibility that this thing is going to work. If we allow them to go off-site, no developer is going to build affordable units on site at 20%.
Yeah.
But can I also suggest, I'm sorry to jump in, but we're not saying anything about affordable to whom in this. And we've seen instances where affordability is generated for 130% of a area median income.
Mark,
AMI.
I believe that built into this is a 60% of AMI average. So there is that.
Okay, good, thanks. I missed that. Thank you.
I guess as a general comment, and maybe folks wouldn't agree with this, but I don't know that it's our job as a community board to like solve all the problems with this. I guess like when Louisa, Ethel and I had a call, we were kind of trying to figure out like what's the right way to make UAP work well in this district. And I thought maybe it was just a better place to come from to say that we asked that the DCP or the council contemplate changes to the UAP program such that it would induce as much affordable housing production as possible in high land cost districts like CD7, so we can see the benefit of this policy in creating affordable housing for neighborhoods. So like something more general instead of trying to with our like yeah. So just like asking for them to explore ways to make it work as opposed to us all they want to
Circulate the language.
yeah.
It's very like. The pizza hands are up. Yeah, and they've been here.
Go ahead.
So, offsite housing, do we want to say what it is or where it is or?
In the same district.
In the district.
Or within a mile of the actual site.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
It has to be within the community district.
Yes.
Or within a mile of the actual site, say that.
I think it's a half mile.
It's
a half mile and inclusionary, it's half a mile.
Use
Yeah.
as the measure of so many of the.
Yeah.
So I think it has to.
Within the district or half mile.
Right.
So 10 blocks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Just deferring to your comments before. Mark made a little bit of fun about the 130% of AMI. But, you know, we also still have to provide for 80% of AMI, 100% of AMI, so, you know, I hate to break this to you, but most of our municipal workers are not at 60% of AMI. So are they gonna all commute in from Rockland County now? Is that close?
But there is a statistic out that almost half of the people who work in New York make approximately 60% of AMI. We're not talking about, you know, policemen and nurses together.
Right, well, I grant you, if you have a nurse and a fireman, they're probably at 160% of AMI. But just talking for somebody who's a state employee, if I were the only person in my family working, we would actually be below AMI. It just happens I've been living in the same place since 1983. So,
But it's AMI in our district, in our area, well, it's very different than AMI in other areas.
yeah, well, yes, in East New York, our AMI is different than the upper west side, it's different than the breeze.
It's the-
So we have to be very careful when we talk about AMI and who we're, and the units as we're talking now. And we're not gonna settle that here, but we just have to be able to talk about affordable housing, not fixed in terms of AMI based on the metropolitan area either. It has to be a refinement.
Yes, and I have said something else. I'm Floyd, I'm the president of the Committee for Environmentally Sound Development. And my concerns are always first, environment. Don't forget, we have global warming in this world, and we have to have it applied. Yeah. For me, living in this area, I'm always afraid of losing what we have, affordable housing. And that should be one of the strongest points that we say, no matter how this thing works out, that we're not going to lose what we have. Now, as far as the other very important thing to keep in our minds is that Manhattan is the most dense borough in the city. And why should we be trying this, put more density in here? That density means more traffic, means more pollution. It means our sewage system doesn't work as well. We shouldn't be helping them, telling them, it's all right if you do it this way, we'll take the density. We should be saying, there's such a thing as quality of life. And that this community board is interested in taking care of the people who live here now. That seems to be missing. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say, someone brought up the infill. That's about the most horrible things that we can do to NYCHA or to what is the Living Towers or any of the others. That was in the 1960s. There was a terrible slum around here. It was really awful the way the housing was. Houses had windows on the walls of the next one. And I thought urban renewal, they did try to do something. They did try to make it a little bit better. I think maybe the houses maybe a little taller, but giving windows air all around, putting grass around there, putting some trees and some flowers, and then a little parking. That was the most wonderful things that had happened here on the west side. And what I keep hearing here is they're little by little, they're taking away the improvements that came with urban renewal. Don't take it away, keep it. Now, New York is not the only place that people can live in. Remember that. Don't feel guilty. You should feel guilty if you're giving up affordable housing, where we are now. And our aim should be further in keeping it that way. This is a very big threat to those of us who live here now. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Yes, you want to ask me a question?
I just want to make a couple of points. There are trade-offs to everything. So there are trade-offs to everything. So if we don't want to increase density in Manhattan, that means rents will continue to go up and up. Right?
That means what?
Rents will go up and up because there's more job creation, more people are moving into the city to work. And if we're not increasing the housing stock, rents and home prices will go up.
There are
Okay,
jobs in other
we're talking about CB7 here, this is what we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking about.
Well, we're comparing the density in Manhattan compared to other boroughs and to the suburbs. People commute to work here. These, the little towns away, the suburbs, they come in from far away. These towns don't have any, we have, what we have, they don't have any density at all. I don't think we have to feel guilty or anything like that. I mean, maybe it's not so nice to have, but it's very nice to have to walk to work, but that's not what happens for everywhere. And not only that, if you increase the density here, you make it a city that's not desirable to be in.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the next.
Just one sentence,
Okay.
and that is, we are on a good path here in our towns. Let us be careful that we don't overly give the powers that be, which we are trying to modify, change, agree with what they're saying, specific formulas.
Yeah.
That's not what we should be doing. What we should be doing is making the points that some of us have been doing now and doing it hard and clear with a couple of examples. That doesn't mean that we have to say that, oh yeah, you could be in a night shirt, but only if we're telling you how to do it. We want to be able to tell, but make out the point, and they have to follow it as the good city. Really, lastly, indeed, the city is, I'm sorry, is built not only of buildings. I mean, we all feel it, and of housing, but it's built about parks and about work and about a whole lot of things. And that's what makes Manhattan in part one of the densest places around, but still is managing, parks and other kinds of things and transportation. So we can't do it all, but let's not forget it. As we are saying, you're doing a big thing, folks. You, city planning, the biggest thing in 60 years. Great. But here's the standards that we are saying to you, you've got to emphasize, and others that we are criticizing. That's what I would say.
So you have enough information on the changes we wanted to make to this one?
I think we should go with those changes.
We just, everybody, when you see it in writing, you can comment and make sure it's.
I have my notes, I'm sure it's.
I just review language.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I'm
Okay,
taking
so
notes as well. Between us, we'll probably get it halfway right.
All right, the next issue is town center zoning. So it says, New York is a city of neighborhoods, and each neighborhood is anchored by commercial corridors with shops and vibrant life. A little town center for every community. Modest apartment buildings with stores on the street and apartments above exist in low density areas across the 5 boroughs, most of them from the 1920s to 1950s. However, today's zoning prohibits that class of form, even in areas where it's very common. Businesses suffer from lack of customers, and people have to live farther away from goods and services. By legalizing housing above businesses on commercial streets in low density areas, city will create new housing, help neighbors with small businesses, and build vibrant mixed use neighborhoods. Doesn't really apply that much to our.
It doesn't.
I think we only had them the document issue relevant.
Yeah,
CB7.
let's just focus on the things that.
Yeah.
This is the city identity from the website.
Nothing there's last.
Oh, I see.
Right.
It's kind of,
This is not applicable to us.
Okay.
I think, but can we say we approve this as a rational way to produce housing in low density areas?
I don't think we should be telling the rest of the city what we want them to do. We should tell the city what we want them to do for us.
I agree.
We say something like we have no objection instead of saying we approve.
say it at all.
Why say it at all?
Yeah.
I mean, I like.
Just leave it out, keep going with this. Keep going with the stuff that we think is
Okay.
fine, then
All
we'll
right.
edit.
Okay, fine.
On these points, if they add to the addition of affordable housing in the rest of the city.
Yeah.
By saying nothing, I think we're skipping over an important opportunity for county.
So if you look at what's written now, it says Cooper-7 has not cited in detail the proposed amendments affecting low density districts. The extent that these proposed changes are intended to expand the availability of new housing, CB7 in principle supports the proposed amendments.
That's fine.
Okay.
Fine.
All right.
But that, the thing to do would be to sort of.
List
which
them out,
one-
yeah.
You gotta list them there. Because then we're supporting them, but saying not us.
Yeah, they're listed.
Right.
Okay, cool. So this next one definitely, that says removing parking mandates.
We have it on
Doesn't really.
There are none in our district and they're not, in that-
30+ years.
doesn't apply to us.
So we can add that later.
It's one of the ones that, for low density areas and we have no objection.
But we would like.
No, the rest of the thing seems to right.
My mistake. My mistake.
Should we do number 3 in the resolution?
The obstacle for non-detection stuff.
You want to tackle
Yeah.
walking?
No.
No.
So, as written, it reads. In the 1960s, zoning rules were designed to permit the construction of power in the park projects. Are large, 1.5 plus acres campuses, such as Stuyvesant Town. In the 1980s, DCP sought to discourage such projects and created contextual zoning in most high-density districts. Contextual zoning or poly housing rules did not change allowable FAR, but created rules limiting the height of buildings, providing for street wall heights, and other rules designed to make new developments contextual with existing older buildings.
Were you reading Richardson text?
Yeah.
No, but that's all.
That's the description of the therefore clause.
It's incomplete.
Okay, so,
Board 7 has both. And it's the. Can we put on the screen?
It's at the bottom of page 4, keep going.
We don't have that copy of paper on front of it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the third. Right there. CBS 7 response.
It's here.
It's a general proposition.
as a general proposition, CB7 favors the easing of restrictions preventing infill on campuses. However, DCP has not provided sufficient information to permit CB7 to endorse the specific proposals in the amendment. The impact of the amendment is likely to differ from campus to campus, and unintended consequences cannot be ruled out. CB7 suggests that DCP prepares studies for each campus subject to the proposed amendments to reflect their probable result. Most importantly, no infill project should proceed to significant and adequate opportunity for community input.
That's good, except I think the wording, we need, it's not clear to me, we want to see the examples as part of this. That is, what some of the criteria would be, otherwise it's just too vague. And we pass, so we got to get something else, it's doing more. But you do it also by an example.
Could we take out the first sentence, which is approving something and then saying we don't have any basis to approve it or not approve?
With this,
Could we start with saying that the second word of the second sentence, DPC has not provided sufficient information, keep the rest, and then we're not taking a position, because we're saying we can't take a position.
And you should start part of the sentence saying.
Could I suggest? I'm sorry, if they haven't made their case to us that we should relinquish our ability, what we do now is what's in the last sentence of that response. We are on a case-by-case basis, we look at the criteria and decide whether or not it is an appropriate change in zoning. This asks for an as-of-right condition. And what we're effectively saying in the last sentence is that we don't know enough to change to an as-of-right condition that we can't predict. Therefore, aren't we saying that we reject this?
Exactly.
I agree with Mark. We can add that because we have not been presented with sufficient information, we reject the proposed zoning change.
I think it goes further than that. We have a process now and we think it's a good process where there is adequate community and.
So
There-
I'm assuming it's gonna be ULURP.
Well, we could say
Well, there
that we
have-
prefer community involvement and process, that the community be part of it.
Right, doesn't the first sentence though, we have like our general,
This, it's keeping and 40.
No, that's a different section.
No, this pertains to this.
Mark's sentence is a good one, and we should just put that in.
I'm deeply concerned. Actually, it's just circling the drain by giving them no options for infill development or any kind of future. What are we condemning these campuses to? I don't want stepping up to pay any of the, I think like 100 billion there, that's. There's maintenance. And capital.
May I? May I? Okay. There are positives about the possibility of having infill, but there's no guarantees of anything in this plan. And so I'll just go to challenges concerns. Among the negative impacts, there are potential challenges and concerns associated with city-based housing initiative for NICA campuses. Gentrification with places. The lack of preservation of affordable housing options for low-income residents. Adding new housing units without sufficient consideration preserving green spaces or addressing infrastructure needs could indeed lead to a decrease in available open areas. If new housing developments are not carefully planned in terms of density and design, they could exacerbate existing overcrowding issues in the NYCHA communities. So overall, the impact of the city's housing opportunities on NYCHA campuses will depend on how the initiative is implemented, the level of community engagement and input, and the extent to which it addresses the unique needs and challenges faced by NYCHA residents. Given that the plan neither considers these factors nor provides strategies to mitigate any negative impacts, we should reject it.
Shelley, if you could send that around, we'll add it to the resolution. I think it's very good.
Everyone here has it, and Max sent it to you.
I sent it to him.
You should
He did?
also know that
Yeah.
product, it's the product
When?
of another little
This
subcommittee
evening.
of Shelley, I believe, me and also
Holly, yeah.
Holly, that was the product of a.
Yeah, and I spoke to people who are leaders in NYCHA. This particularly, because 1.5 acres or greater affects Douglas houses. Tremendous, absolutely, and Amsterdam houses. And that's about 4,000 people in our community.
Would you object to having a sentence that also says, you know, if we are not opposed to infill on campuses across the board,
That's,
but then
that's I think very
I think
important.
that's important to say because
Okay, well, then there's an example, which I presented before, three in the city, where there was an RFP for senior housing, affordable senior housing on campus with priority given to people who have lived, now seniors in the development, and with priority for them to move in to relieve 2 and 3 bedroom apartments but give affordable, secure, nice, affordable senior housing with all the amenities. What happened if all 3 examples that in the RFP went through have been excellent, and the Douglas houses said they would want it too, but that's a specific use of the infill. But infill has a very bad taste in NYCHA based on the history.
Oh, can I? Yeah. So just like, it's reading this, I actually was kind of surprised by the final sentence because it seems like kind of saying all the good things about infill with some reservations. And then it's a no. So I was just like, oh, Shelley and Philly on board, and then it gets the end and it's like, no.
I was
what
trying
we
to be
do?
fair about what might be good, okay, but there's no
Right.
guarantee that it's good.
And you're saying, like, you keep saying how much
They're
infill is
dangerous.
great, and yet we're saying no to infill, so can't we say, we're supportive of infill as long as it considers all of these things, as opposed to just coming out as with a negative statement about it, and.
I think a comment that we're not opposed to infill per se, but these are the dangers of this uncontrolled,
But I think
unmitigated.
we should include some emphasis to indicate what Melissa just said. Because, for example, it's a good concept of campus living and all. At the same time, it also.
No,
creates harm.
I'm not
So,
objecting to that we
but
put some of
let's
this in, but the emphasis has to be on the fact that it's a dangerous undertaking and the negatives far outweigh the potential negatives.
Use potential dangers rather than danger.
Yeah.
Overall.
I think Shelley's report accurately reflects what we all believe, which is we agree that infill has can have a positive effect, can add to affordable housing, can add to housing, and yet it can be done in a bad way. And before we approve it, we need to know answers to the various questions that Shelley's posed. It's just not, it's not in a place now where we can blanketly approve it, but we do believe in infill housing. I think
It's not
Shelley's,
blanket approval.
what?
If we list challenges and concerns, then it's not a blanket approval.
Right,
Yes, okay,
Right,
it's
we
not
can-
the words of the world to say it the way it was.
Right.
We're saying, we're open to it, as advantages, but
Yeah,
we want
but
you to.
there are serious reservations.
One comment is.
Yeah, I think it hits just the right spot.
I mean,
I think the
works in
way
it.
it's written is great. I just think that we can.
It needs to be shortened.
Maybe we can condense.
It's for us.
Yeah.
Was also,
Can I make one comment? Where it says, adequate opportunity for community input, I think that sounds like us, which is really fine, and that's our role in life. But it also should say something about the community.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe we should say that.
Data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who never get represented.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
all right.
all right, so the next one is.
Could I make a comment?
No.
I've had my hand up for a while. Before we get too far down the road, I wanted to say something about parking minimums. Because I think we decided that we weren't going to opine on those, but I think it's in our interest to do that in some way to support eliminating parking minimums, because what they do is they incentivize people to own and drive cars, which leads to increased traffic congestion and harmful emissions, and particularly without congestion pricing, which looks like we're not going to have for a while, at least. This is going to affect everybody in the city because cars travel, unlike apartments. And so it's in our interest, I think, to express our support, even though we don't have parking minimums in our district.
I agree.
Okay, that could be part of the low density conversation that we have in one place where we outline.
Things that don't really apply to us,
But
but
that
the
we-
general, yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
so the next topic is the creation of the R11 and R12 district designations. And
Wait, can we skip some?
Yeah.
Can you skip the junior center? So where is the conversion? Where we got conversion of non-residential?
Conversion of
all right. All right,
commercial
yeah,
to
fine.
residential.
So, what our current language says is CB7 approves proposed amendments regarding conversion from non-residential to residential uses. CB7 recommends that rather than using specific cutoff date, which might require future amendments, the amendment should permit conversions of buildings older than 35 years.
That's what we're allowed to expand, yeah.
Cause it's, it would be pegged in 1990 and then like.
I'm sorry, could you read that again?
They peg it in that building, it's up in 1990, so.
I
30
can't
years.
see that.
Oh, sorry. I'll read it. CB7 approves proposed amendments regarding conversion from non-residential to residential uses. CB7 recommends that rather than using a specific cutoff date, which might require future amendment, the amendment should permit conversions in buildings older than 35 years.
That part is very good. That last part. What I'm really concerned about is this authorization for conversions that can add 25% of floor area on a building that is already overbuilt.
None of which they can.
And it's an authorization. So that means that the commission by itself can just agree. It doesn't go to the council. It doesn't have a public hearing. It can go to us if they feel like sending it, but there's no official ULURP or time frame from it. And it's a little scary. George did this also. But we discussed it when we were talking about Lincoln Square. It is dangerous.
So
Because
how
every time-
how would you modify the language?
I take it out, it's a new one, either that or it has to be ULURP.
Tibita, authorization is always a dangerous word, process, because it means it always goes only within city planning, and there's never any other consultation of any kind or other criteria. So I know what Louisa is saying. It was that, and then it precludes either, you know, on ULURP and something else that involves another entity like us, and that is a good thing to do.
The word authorization is not a period here, but I take your point.
Yeah.
Maybe we should add a sentence saying should be subject to the ULURP process.
Yeah, or.
My understanding was that at least some authorizations do get referred for like a 30-day review period that's advisory on our part. But it just on this specific proposal, I do think there's some fear mongering going on, like that this is gonna cause all these huge building enlargements. I spoke to a planner about it, and they said basically its intention is to provide limited as of right allowances for existing building to make safety or accessibility retrofits, even if those would create minor non-compliances. It's to give projects additional flexibility. This is a very common structure in zoning. It's pretty limited, and that CPC would be applying it that way. So I think it's not going to be like an end of the world thing. It's meant for like minor
Something like 4% of buildings are even eligible for this.
I'm sorry, but that's a lot of buildings, not for us.
No.
But
I mean,
in
the whole
Midtown,
city, including Midtown and downtown,
Midtown,
4%.
There's a lot of buildings. There's some very, very big buildings down there that have been kept as commercial buildings because they can't do anything. They can't move.
But the rules, the rules, windows and space, like.
Absolutely, and that's why that the community boards should have a say in what is going on.
Whatever say.
So Louisa, if I could jump in for a quick second, would it allay your fear if we added a sentence that said that, a proviso that there was a referral to a community board for a minimum of 45 days, which would allow you to get through a committee and a full board, and would preserve at least preserve the authorization process, but make sure that we have a meaningful opportunity to be heard. Would that do it for you?
Well, the thing is that they change it from 30 to 60 days. It's a fluid number of days. And depending upon how serious it is. It's been 60 on more minor things, it was 30, and that is decided in-house. So that,
Yeah, that's.
that concerns me.
Let's make it 60.
Yeah, let's have to ask for 60 days.
Take
Okay.
away.
You always need 60 days, depending on what your schedule is.
Just open it enough without paralysis.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that that's a good thing, to be able to do. It opens it to the community without
Okay.
making stasis. So let's just go. with it.
When they rezone the financial.
Okay, let's back to calling out people.
Absolutely.
Just go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is another example of something that was presented to us very simplistically. And thanks to George James and then also Louisa, the whole thing about, oh, you can get another 20% on an authorization without anybody knowing about it is something that we discovered only through George and then through Louisa. So I don't think it's trivial. I mean, in our district, now that the Bible Society has been replaced with a luxury residential building, I'm not sure we have a single largish, totally commercial building that would ever be subject to this anyway. So maybe we want to kind of downgrade a little bit how we talk about it and put it in that general category of, gee, maybe this is a good idea, and yeah, it should be not just the 1990, but we are concerned in a general way about the authorization thing, and should it apply to us or anybody else, there ought to be a mandatory review.
Because
I'm fine with that.
yeah, authorizations are in-house and they basically go by what the mayor wants.
That's right.
And the Bible Society is replaced by the Tower of Babel.
Yes.
So he sees an opening and it comes, so that we all grow.
That's weird.
We have these, so now you're up to the R11.
Yeah, so creation of R11 and R12 district designations. The proposed amendments would create new zoning district designations, R11 and R12, which would be subject to mandatory affordable housing rules, 20 or 30% affordable units, and would permit FARs up to 15 and 18 respectively. DCP is not seeking to map any such districts at present. Any such mapping would be subject to a full ULURP, Uniform Land Use Procedure Review. Our comment is CP7 approves the proposed amendment.
I think that the proposed language from Richard is a little stronger and affirmative than what our discussion was the last time. I mean, everything, the descriptions, prior description is true, but I think a number of us were just saying, wait a minute, more really big buildings that would be in our district with the density, with the, all the things, that Alex's points, Ethel's points, and all of the super talls we have surrounding us. I'm not sure, although we do have a super tall in our district now, we're about to. So I'm more skeptical about this. I don't like the idea of just saying, I like the terseness of the language, that's a good thing. But I'm not comfortable saying we approve the proposed amendment.
Well, I mean, this is mandatory affordable housing. This is what we're all.
You're not gonna get it.
That's the only
But
way you could use the.
Just ask one question. Okay, so we get the ULURP. Who in this room is gonna vote for that ULURP?
Let's
For the
do
elected
it.
people? We want to identify you now.
That's fine, I'm on YouTube, you can watch it, it'll be saved for later. I would.
I'll go for it.
I mean, for actually mapping the district.
Okay, thing is, what we have to think about is there is one site in the district. And that's the ABC site.
Yep.
And it's huge. And the way FAR works is you take the square footage of the site and you multiply it by the number, and the higher the number, the more floor area you get.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is a huge amount of floor area in the near future. And you have to think about it in connection with the ABC site.
And George James mentioned R11.
Right, that.
Right.
Well,
That's the plan.
Just be that if,
Like, no, that's his proposal is use R11 as a way of designing the
He
site,
has
right?
to show an example of how that would be effective.
And that's
because
what he's working on.
Can I suggest language, which is that, I think we can say CB7 approves the creation of these new districts, but would evaluate any future project utilizing them based on the individual project merits. Something like that, just to make it clear.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we can deal with the ABC site.
Yeah.
I mean, so basically, if we have one of those just case spot, we don't, it's the only way to. We're free to.
And after all, so, yeah.
That's you, yeah.
It's fine. I remind everyone that the cross talking cannot be heard by our friends and colleagues on Zoom. I just remember how painful it was when I was on Zoom.
Thanks, Jamie.
I think that's it.
no.
Oh.
Besides housing, this was about. And you're ready to hear the arrows. Oh, and the 30-foot, 50-foot. Or 30.
The 30, 20.
Oh,
Accessory dwelling units, which is part of that. That's why we're doing it.
I know it's right there.
Ah,
And the,
Okay,
What's
number,
the
okay,
second?
number 6. Okay, number 6, you're right. Presently, churches and certain other nonprofit owners are permitted to transfer unused development rights to adjacent sites. The proposed amendments would increase the area for transfer to include any site on the same block as the transfer or across the street. CB7 includes all. CB7 approves the proposed amendment.
Didn't Adam circulate something that was pretty informative?
raising our hand.
Oh, Brodheim was the new member of the committee, looked at all the potential like land sites and we found stuff. Yeah. So that, I think that's how we ended.
Are we having a discussion?
Okay.
Yeah, we spent 2.5 years making sure that would not happen, okay? By going block by block, block by block. And this kind of frees it all up. And I think that's outrageous. I think that, you know, being able to transfer like along different times, we had it set different zoning lots. So we would not be able to transfer them over. There may be situations where it may be desirable, they're few and far between. I think we should disapprove this clearly.
What's the downside of transferring air rights?
Because you can build higher and higher and higher.
And this is not just the site, this is the block.
What? On the block.
You just made it an enormous distance.
Adam Brodheim, our new member, did a study that he circulated to everyone. That did a detailed analysis of all of our landmarks, every single one in this district. And he determined there were really only 2 viable sites that could possibly benefit from this because so much of our land is in historic districts and would not support that. And the 2 sites were ones we both care about. Case Church and West Presbyterian.
Right.
So I would support this for our district. I think for other districts, there might be problems, but I would support this for our district.
Yeah, I mean, I never remember which saints this is. It's Saint Paul and Saint Andrew or Saint Paul. We met there 2 days ago. Very sympathetic situation, and I did try to I had a little bit of a back and forth with Kay about that. But there's principle involved, and the principle is, as Shelley has said, is bigger and bigger all around. I don't know why, and I wasn't able to find out from Kay why thus far St. Paul and St. Andrew and Culture has not been able to, because I think they would like to sell their air rights. It's not clear that one way or another, from what I know so far, that if you have the expanded area of
potent, that would provide any different opportunity, but because it's all heavily built.
No, I thought they sold it to this building 40 years ago.
No, they said, and that's not the case. I mean, there were some errors in Adams, some factual errors, I think, in Adams' analysis, but leaving that aside, this is one example. And then, of course, we all know about West Park Church and what's been going on with that.
And how does this specifically apply?
But, I think Shelley's more general point is what really concerns me is, bigger and bigger all around. All the things we've been talking about with the density. Oh, and it doesn't have any affordable housing component. It's just, you can sell your air rights to anybody that can then build a really big building. So I don't think this is a no-brainer and I don't support it.
The regulations as is didn't have anything to do with affordable housing.
That's correct.
Okay, and
But it's a smaller.
and
area.
zoning lot mergers in general don't have anything to do with that. Other things can generate affordable housing. But what we're adding another restriction to this, the purpose of this is to preserve landmarks, not to create affordable housing. So let's just focus on the original intent.
And
Fair point.
to work the landmark and not to unduly weigh down the surrounding area.
Right, so if you can move them further away, you're better.
Yeah.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah.
Could I jump in on this?
Please.
Thank you. I'm going to be singing the song of affordable housing should be a part of every part of this for the whole evening, but this is the exception. We have competing values here. We have the value of preserving our historic fabric, and we have the value of diversifying our community by creating affordable housing. I'm convinced, based on Kay's experience, by the West Park experience, that we can't do both at the same time and on the same lot. And I also think that this strengthens the constitutionality of the landmarks law, which is always subject to vulnerability in my estimation. So this is the one exception where I would not condition the ability to sell these the floor area from the TDRs from a landmark site to on affordable housing. I do not disagree with Klari that this will create taller and taller and taller buildings. I think that's the price we pay for preserving our landmarks, and that's just one person's opinion. Thanks.
I could just add one thing on that. I think Mark is a not joke. I don't want Justice Alito to get his hands on our landmark precedents.
We don't want to get this,
Is he
don't get
looking
his
for-
hands on anything.
On anything.
Other than the rope taking down flag.
Well, the neighbors said today that the argument was after the wife.
Right.
Turned up with the flag.
All right,
So we can go back to having.
so I think we have a conclusion on that one.
What we do.
Can I,
We have. Need a vote.
can we go back to number 5 for a second? I had a thought about it that I think what this does is create mandatory affordable housing at 20 or 30%, and allows 15 to 18 FAR buildings. I don't see how we can pass this and also pass the provisions concerning UAP, because no developer who is willing to put up 20% affordable housing would resist the temptation to ask for an R11 or R12 designation. They simply would, if they were willing to put in 20% affordable housing, why not go for the higher FAR? I think it's a dangerous provision on, and
Right.
I've changed my mind on it. So, but I think that we can't really predict the consequences, except that it may well be that the developer of the ABC site would take advantage of this, very much to the detriment of the community.
But we have the ULURP process.
Yeah. But that is not good enough. It would not, it would be limited because the power would go away, Richards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? So I just want to
any proposal that comes before us during a ULURP, we have the ability to reject. So we're not mapping this anywhere again. We're creating a new tool that we can then say yes or no to. But I don't agree that like the creation of the tool existing strips us of any power or discretion.
But we are advisors, remember that.
Right.
It's not, that-
If they don't have the opportunity, then we don't have to worry about the.
Right.
Yeah.
look, it's not gonna strip us of any power. Because we never had any power in the first place.
Anyway,
Developer wants to go through ULURP, I don't. That a majority of the city council will approve it, or that a majority, or that the city planning will approve it. It's better off, we're better off not having this proposal in here, so we don't have to have a ULURP.
Second motion.
Okay, I think we should vote on this one.
Okay.
All right.
Back this one. So on 5 or on 5? Back voting on 5.
Let's vote on 5 and 6.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is why they raise that there. Like, you know,
Okay, so we're going to just approve versus approve 5. So,
Correct.
approve what they need.
Yeah. Okay. So
Let's go.
all in favor of approving? All in favor of approving 5?
With the case,
No.
case amendment, which,
For the, yeah, for
The motion was,
the
the
amendment.
motion was to disapprove,
What difference does it make?
because that's what you said.
What? Now,
It's better to if we don't approve, then we're gonna have to go back to disapproving.
And if we don't disapprove, we have to go back to approve.
That's a good point, but that's not where Richard started.
I've seen this movie before.
can we just make a decision now?
As the parliamentarian, I want to say that after 2 hours of a meeting, we let parliamentary procedure slide just slightly.
Oh, yes, excuses.
The text says CB7 approves.
But he just said he changed it.
He changed his line, fine. So we're gonna vote on the text.
Oh,
Okay. So,
committee members only.
As the text has changed, what Richard,
Well, no, but like what text are we voting on? As written or as?
as it is,
As one ballot.
As written. No, fine.
what?
In our.
That's the point. Richard said that he now disapproves. So he wants now having a vote on whether we disapprove this.
okay, fine. All in favor of disapproving number 5, the creation of R11 and R12?
Always. Is it just committee?
Just committee.
Richard.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, all in favor of approving? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have a tie.
Which means that it doesn't. The other way. it's not.
What it means is that we present it as a committee tie to the full board, and the full board gets to decide.
Richard,
I think.
Because you're not present.
Right.
you can know.
You can vote. You can vote.
Yeah.
You'll be number 6.
Right. And whatever.
It's all up to you.
That will be fine.
So
Approved. No, it's disapproved if you
Right.
voted there.
it's disapproved. Okay.
The vote is 6 to disapprove, is it not inside the vote?
That's correct.
So disapprove.
So 5, it's a 5.
Which means that the language there has to be.
And Richard, you know how to modify it because you proposed it.
I'm sorry, I'm losing the trend of the conversation here. What just happened?
We just voted and you won.
Could we do small and shared housing now? Which does affect us.
Yes.
Okay, moving right along.
We're getting there. We're doing air rights. We're doing air rights next. Okay. So expansion of area. For air rights.
We just have to wait, but I wanted to say I'm gratified to hear you finally reject some. It sounds like you're beholden to the Department of City Planning.
They're throwing this thing at you. This is a one object. 2,000, how many pages is it? 2,000.
We're in business.
This is a blunt option. You don't have to be surgeons. You don't have to work on their blunt option. If you don't like something, say no. Because what George James is saying is his thing too. Don't do their work. They throw something ugly at you, throw it back.
Can the committee keep working?
So
Yeah,
can I
please.
can I just thank, I just want to thank you for coming and for enduring our conversation, but I would also say that I don't think we're in agreement on any of the points at all. So
I'm talking about a general, we have to say this is good and that's good.
Yeah.
You don't have to say anything is good.
What do we think it's the?
If you cannot accept what they're putting in a proposal to you, reject it. Reject it.
Well, there's something.
I think we.
Otherwise,
I don't know.
So therefore, if you're only one of many can go on.
I can't control my screen. No.
Okay, sure. Thank you for letting me in.
Thank you.
Public
Public meeting.
Air right.
Okay, air right. I think we should vote on air rights as well.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
all right,
What number is it?
6.
We just did that.
We voted on 5. We talked about 6, so we didn't vote on it.
Oh, sure. They landmarks.
Okay, so. All in favor of approving number 6, expansion of area for transfer of air rights. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3.
I feel sorry for the.
Okay, so it passed.
You
9,
know,
9. Anyone?
this, by the way, is an authorization and a certification, which is even worse.
I was abstaining and I'm almost about to say no. Because of it being no.
And I don't know. So we should count the no's, just no's, so that you have the record for the full board to hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had
Favor?
8. I thought it was 9 in favor.
No.
But isn't the procedure?
And possibly.
Therefore not reported.
Here 11.
Are we going to the full board and have to vote on each of these items?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. And if so, then you should know how the committee voted on each item.
Okay, so then we'll
Or gonna take, we just present the whole resolution and say whatever the ultimate vote is, so
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's
And we
what I
know what I think of this.
asking a lot for, not that it's not their responsibility to get smart on all of these points, but if they get going in front of the point, will be very difficult.
I agree.
Right, probably wise to keep the record in case we.
Yeah, so we'll know.
Let's start with the yeses.
Okay, yes is raise your hand.
What we yes for?
The same thing we did before.
Air right.
Along that, and then we just, no, but Louisa had an additional point we hadn't talked about at all, about this provision, which was the authorization thing, and I'm wondering if we could just hear a sentence about that before we vote, because that's another point about this that we had not been aware of or talked about.
Okay. Yeah, well,
As I understand it, and this wasn't something that I researched that greatly, but once they get there, they cannot increase the amount of floor area more than is allowed for that site. However, if they want to exceed that, it's an authorization. And there is also a certification, and what a certification is, just that they have met, that the city planning commission determines that they have met certain requirements. That's it.
Yeah, not good enough. And so do you want to add, subject to a 60-day comment period by the local community board?
That would help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would.
That's
Jerry,
because what we're doing is kind of a mini.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
well, that would
Okay,
be.
let's do it.
Let's add that. Okay,
Put that in and it might make
I wrote
me
that down.
feel that if you go flip, I don't flip.
No, I like that.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna 60 day, huh?
We
Back it up.
We have to vote on this.
We're gonna vote. Okay.
We can
Are we
swear.
voting with that point?
Wait.
Because we want to record the number, so. The ayes. So, the air rights, we just added the subject to a 60-day review.
Okay, so that's now included, as
Yes.
Beverly said, okay, I will change my, I will now vote for it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Richard's 8, okay. Okay, and then the no's are, raise your hand, 1. Beverly, you're a no? Oh, you don't vote. 1 no, okay. Abstention? Any abstentions?
We do take votes from non-committee board members on matters where we. Okay, I would vote in favor.
I would also, so 2 non-committee yeses.
Mark, would you like to vote?
Tibita, the.
I would, if we're voting on 6, I vote yes.
The 3 non-committee.
Oh.
The idea of reducing the rear yards from 30 to 20 feet is not listed as one of the primary things, but I think that we really have to.
That's a big thing.
On the mini apartments. That's what I'm saying. That's number 8.
Okay, so this is, so number 7 is Lincoln Square Special.
Lincoln Square Special District.
Yeah, all right. The proposed amendment will incorporate the UAP framework in the Lincoln Square Special District and eliminate what DCP deems redundant rules regarding bulk and minimum dwelling unit size. It would also require 30% lot coverage, 60% of a building's floor area to be at or below 150 feet, allow variation in height for tower tops, and prevent recesses in the street wall.
Just makes it all bigger.
Discussion?
I'm sorry, doesn't this eliminate the requirement that 60% of the floor area be below 150 feet rather than create it?
Yes.
It does, it does.
Yeah, the text needs to be amended then, right?
Yeah.
It says eliminate, it needs to
Are
be.
you sure about
clarified.
that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that.
Okay,
Current zoning does require that. I think that's what they're trying to get rid of.
okay.
Yeah, exactly. The current zoning requires that. They're trying to get rid of that. Exactly.
Thanks, Mark.
What is the reason that we should support something like this? Anybody have an opinion?
To create more housing and to reduce housing
More,
prices,
what type of housing?
market rate housing.
Market rate housing on.
Lincoln Square.
If I don't think we're adding floor area here. I think that we're just creating apartments further up in the sky.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's ABC.
Let's be clearer about these 2 points, we gotta get straighten this out. As what this is really saying.
What's that?
Yeah, I think one thing I recall Seema saying was that it would basically just try to lead to better building forms and it was more of a cleanup, but to me, the more important piece is the UAP and having a chance to actually get affordable housing out of any development created in the Lincoln Square.
But what about the form and the FAR of the building? About what are we talking about? They're trying to lead toward a certain FAR in order to come. What is it and what are the implications as well? We can't just say it's going to be 15% or whatever. It's affordable and they're probably is on the very good. I mean, maybe they don't pay it.
Jamie's raising it.
Oh,
Hi, so if you'll forgive me, I edited the text here and I think I either made it less clear or maybe even changed the meaning.
Yes.
And it's wrong. So let me go back to Richard's original and brilliant, right? Or maybe Beverly's original, right? Whoever wrote it did it better than I did. So it's supposed to say the proposed amendments would incorporate, would you like to read it? Okay, the proposed amendments would incorporate the UAP framework in the Lincoln Square Special District. Here were the changes. And would eliminate what DCP deems redundant rules regarding bulk and minimum dwelling unit size. And would require 30% lot coverage, require 60% of a building's floor area to be at or below 150 feet. Allow variation in height for tower tops and permit recesses in the street wall.
Is this Richard's?
And increase in height.
That's Richard's original draft, and I trying to tighten it up, just
Screwed it up.
But we have some people saying it would eliminate the 60% and other people saying it would require it, as apparently it does now, so it's.
Well, we really need to go to the original.
I don't really.
I think let me do it.
I can't do it now, but the requirement that a certain percentage of the floor area be below a certain height is current zoning. They may be changing the numbers on that, and I'll get back to you on if that's the case. But by any measure, the intention of the provision is to allow the same FAR to be built higher into the sky. That's the purpose of this.
I think we should check that one out.
Yep. Yeah. I don't have this in front of me.
I mean,
You can
only the
increase
ones
the
that
top.
are very tall buildings, it's New York, but let's be clear how they get there and what we're talking about.
You can increase the top by 20% as long as the increase. They allow you to go 10% further out, as long as the increase is no more than 10% of the previous, of the low unit. I mean, basically, think of, that well-known wedding cake and.
Is it the wedding cake plan? Is that what you're saying?
It is, but you could also do these kind of three-sided ones now.
My recollection was that they were retaining the 60%. But that's just, don't know, we better.
Well, we should know what's right.
This may be one item that we need to clarify and just circulate, see what the committee's view is on it. I don't think we're prepared to vote tonight.
So we have the facts later on.
Because I thought that they were packing more.
yeah, let's move on and we'll clarify via email.
And
Okay.
I guess then the question is there a consensus that if the 60% remains, it's approved, and if the 60% does not remain, it is not approved?
Well, we'll figure that out.
I don't think
when
we
we
know.
see it.
We should take a vote.
But I think we ought to get the facts. If necessary, we could meet as a committee 5 minutes before the board meeting on the 18th. And fill this in.
Okay,
Or even before.
fine, move on.
Okay. Number 8, miscellaneous proposed amendments. Establish a new system of street wall heights to permit conformity to existing structures. Provide more flexible base heights to permit conformity to existing structures. Permit dormers up to 40 feet in width above the maximum street wall height.
This is so technical.
Increase permitted tower lot coverage to allow for more efficient building floor plate. Modify ground floor regulations to provide that the second floor begins no lower than 13 feet above the sidewalk.
No. Okay.
I have to.
Yeah, so I don't know, I mean, I've been at all our meetings, I do not recall, but I may be wrong, that we collectively recommended approval on this. Looking at it now, I don't have any sense of what its application, if any, is to our district. I don't have a strong sense of what it's about generally. I do not feel qualified to approve it.
I'm not sure I disapprove it, but I don't think I don't know enough about what we're talking about.
I think I would need.
They use the
a
word
drawing.
conformity
Let's see,
twice.
I wanted to show, I wanted to give a drawing of each of those, all of them, we would understand it.
Does anybody have a sense it applies to our district or
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
It definitely does.
Okay, so how or how it applies? I mean, we already.
It's conformity, they want wall height, street conforms on the wall height and wave heights.
Why did we ask Richard why did he pick these out of all the many changes?
What did you say?
These are the ones that they have flagged, that they are asking people to align.
So I've had my hand up for a while. We've been in that system. I don't know. To me, this reads as like, DCP's urban designers wanting to just kind of give themselves some more flexibility. I agree, it's kind of hard for us to understand how it applies to our district, so I don't disagree with Klari that maybe this is one of those where we say we don't have enough clarity to really opine. I'm not saying say no, just say we don't have enough information, but you know, I don't see this as like harmful necessarily in any way. I think it's more aesthetics. Yeah.
Okay.
Every single one of those new buildings where you see these funny little bumps on it, those are the dormers. That's what we're talking about.
What's an example?
Look at any of the buildings that were built in the last 5 to 10 years, and they have these things that sometimes look like little pimples. I'm not making.
So we're gonna have a field trip.
Okay, because the traditional thing was you go up so far, you set back, then you might go up more and set back.
Right.
Okay, so that, but now you set back, and then the first setback, you set back this much, then you go a little higher and you set back this much, and you go a little bit higher and you set back this much. So you can look at the building on 96 and Broadway that's just been built, you look at the building at 93rd, and sorry, 91st and Broadway, and you'll see that, forgetting the overhang, don't overhang. Look at the building on 95th between Broadway and Amsterdam, and you'll see the same funny thing happens. It looks like a stack of boxes.
And what is the purpose and the good, and what are the designers doing?
I have no idea what the designers are doing. I'm an architect. But what they're trying to do is get some variation in the top of the building. I don't think it always works, because what they're doing is just applying the mathematical formula that's in the zoning resolution.
For this particular kind of thing, if the designers are saying this, that's all, it
Yeah,
seems
They
acceptable.
want to change it a little bit. As far as the street wall, in some of the lower density districts particularly, sometimes the street wall doesn't do what the regulations say it does. So you're actually not, if you do what you're being asked to, literally, you're creating actually a problem in disturbing the street wall, because you might have to match the building on one side, which might be inordinately set back. It might be an old farmhouse.
Not quite.
I'm going to some of the Queens.
There's all this suggestion, I guess, for this to say.
And complete.
Yeah, not about what the impact would be in our district to take on this issue.
It's fairly.
Melissa, we're accepting your suggestion.
Yes.
I wrote it down.
Broad, I need to.
Okay, does this mean more tower, wider, with greater tower coverage? Richard?
Greater tower.
I'm sorry?
coverage.
It's also like this. What he's saying is to allow for more efficient building floor plate, which would mean a
Wider,
wide.
right.
Tower.
There's more efficient designs.
It'll be lower and wider.
So it's more
Lower and
efficient,
wider, yeah.
maybe they're cheaper.
Given the same FAR, yeah.
Could be good. Could be, but we don't know. We don't know. No, I agree with those.
All right, so here we are with the ADUs. All right, number 8.
What's the consensus on this? Are we approving it, or we don't know enough?
Not enough info, so we're gonna say.
Okay.
We can just say, as I was saying in an earlier meeting, we don't have the illustrated drawings that normally accompany these kind of change.
need, and
Right,
therefore,
so we need to see what it actually
Yeah, we need
means.
more information and.
not just.
And illustrations.
We may have the illustrations in that 50-page thing that they sent around.
This
No.
this doesn't tell us enough.
Okay.
All right, what's up? Can I ask what's our estimated time of completion? How are we doing?
Yeah.
Well,
One of last one.
No, we have
I know, but I.
and we've got the 32 share setbacks, the share house.
Well, yeah, what's, yes, it's in the same.
Parking
it's in the
and-
same, yeah.
accessory dwelling units.
Yeah. Okay, so DCP has endeavored to identify opportunities for additional housing units throughout the city, including in low density districts, primarily in low density districts outside Manhattan. These include adjusting maximum FARs, which currently restrict construction to 1 or 2 family homes. The new limits to permit buildings up to 5 stories in certain areas. Let's talk about that one first.
You can get a larger home and not have any more families.
Right.
That's what happens.
The other thing is the
But this is what-
ADUs, the reason, why aren't ADUs permitted obstructions? Because what this does is give room for an ADU on that 10 feet.
We were talking about the first bullet.
Yeah, the first bullet is the not ADU. Yep.
So I think in our district,
I don't have bullets.
I think it is correct that because you don't have, because we're a solid street wall, you would not have separate access to the rear yards, and I believe it's correct, we should not be concerned about people building little things in their backyards, because you can't get to them. However, the most recent answer to us was the side yard thing is not relevant to us, I can't say whether that's true or not, but taking that as given. We had a big discussion, or some discussion about this at our last meeting, and I think the essential thing here is the changing the 30-foot rear yard requirement to the 20, and I want to speak about that. We mostly, I
Against
think,
that.
we're pretty strongly against that. I
Very
think it's
much.
correct to say we disapprove of it. But I want to give the examples that make me completely persuaded of that, and maybe others are or will be too. As I said last time, I've been on our preservation committee for a long time, and so what we see all the time, I really thought we maybe have 30 a year, I think it's fewer than that, but it's a lot. We get, one example is people who are owners and they're gonna use, there may have been 8 or 10 apartments in their building, but by the time we see that all that housing is lost, that's not the issue right now. What they want to do is they want to expand their rear yard to be side to side, the full up to the 30 feet. So what they're doing is to anything they can within current zoning to expand the volume, the interior volume of their house by building full side to side, that's restricted by the 30 feet. So those are the people who own those houses. If they were to come to us in the future, where they're, for the most part, their strongest incentive and strongest interest is expanding their interior space. I can tell you, I think a great many of them, and maybe even some who are already there and already living there would say, oh, great, forget the 30 feet. We're going to expand to 20 feet and we're going to add all this more interior space. Second major example is developers who are buying one of these places that 8 or 10 tenants, they're gone. But what they want to do is make as many either a luxurious single family house as they can with as much interior space, and you've got, never mind all the examples, you can picture it, all the types of rooms, offices and dens and swimming pools, whatever. Or rental. Same
You know what are the chicken shish kebabs from
I can do that.
what do you call it? And then dressing on the side on the salad.
Richard, please.
Wait, the shish kebab.
So I think we're close to a consensus last time and should remain there, that's what we care about. We care about our donut, all the things about the light and air, the congeniality and the gardens and all of those things. And
The comment focuses on.
yes,
So we should look
yeah,
at the comment.
yeah.
So, so just first, the first bullet point about the FARs. Where are we at on that?
I don't even understand that.
And the idea is that if there's like single family homes, you could build a duplex, for instance, that the idea.
Yeah,
Yes, in other places.
We made a comment that was supportive of that, but that we're concerned in the upper side it could be used for luxury development. I mean, can we say something like that? Or we understand it could be beneficial in other neighborhoods, but we've seen a history of luxury development.
Right.
You know, let's just be very frank with that.
Well, why is that an issue on townhouse, but not an issue on islands?
Because we're talking about, well, I don't know, but my assumption is, again, they have.
30 to 20 foot applies to all buildings.
No, we're talking about the first. Okay,
Just maximum there.
which yeah, that's.
Oh, about accessory, okay.
No. I'm specific, I'm assuming they're talking about building like duplexes and single family areas, but it would be nice if they were a little more specific.
And I think we should take the position, we just have no position on that, or just.
What does the word certain areas mean? Does it even apply to us? That's my question.
It doesn't, that's.
So if it doesn't,
maybe we just say that.
yeah, I think it might apply.
And it's not applied, but can we also say we believe that it would likely produce additional housing in low density areas?
Why should we
Yeah,
opine on that? Or it was.
I mean, I'm sorry, why should?
I have a question. Why do we think it does not apply to us?
I'm not saying it doesn't apply, but they don't tell us whether it applies or doesn't.
I mean, could.
I mean, but
could there not-
nobody's building
have
one
one
or
or two family homes.
nobody's building 1 or 2 family homes in this area.
That could be
build.
expanded.
Oh,
To,
could you not
that could be expanded to. Right, there are existing 1 and 2 family homes that could be expanded to 5 stories.
Yeah,
They
I mean,
exist.
developers could do, and maybe to some extent are trying to do that in our district where all tenants are gone, but they're creating more than one luxury unit in the same building.
Or maybe I have a brownstone and I wanna put an extra unit in there so my kid can live with me.
Yeah, you have a 2-story brownstone.
They're not in this district.
Don't have them.
We have a small row of 3s.
Well, the 23rd.
It should
Okay.
fill up. The question is whether or not this applies in our district, and it sounds like whatever side of the issue you're on, it does apply in our district.
It does. It does. I think we should try to preserve the 30 foot. Oh, well, that's the whole idea.
No, we're on point one.
We're on point one.
Family home,
Bruce,
and whether you can make adjustments
30 foot,
under
yeah,
the
I just
maximum.
want
30 foot, I think we're all in agreement that we want to.
Okay.
Right?
I just wanted to second your comment, which is when you have 2 people going 20 foot, now you've gone from 6 feet to 40. And just remember, your typical side street is 6 feet. So now you're creating this, if you go to the 20, you can create a situation within the block. It's actually only 2/3 of the street.
No good. Do it.
Oh, yeah.
Man, oh man, no good.
No,
All right. So then,
Can we be sort of general about the other things and very strong on the 2030?
yeah. All right, the next one, eliminate requirements for open space. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that.
When would we ever want? When they take.
Right.
Has anyone read up on this one?
Could I jump in on that? Because 200 Amsterdam is going to be one of your examples for that. That's that building over by Lincoln Towers at 69th Street. And remember, they had that tortured map of open space in order to support an extra tall building on that site. And they're essentially using a jigsaw puzzle of parking lot spaces in Lincoln Towers to create the open space ratio. Otherwise, they could have built that without any encumbrance on that. Remember also when when our board was confronting the possibility of a nursing home on the parking lot at Park West Village. And the question was whether or not they had met or exceeded their open space ratio. And and there are vagaries there where you're allowed to use the roof, a private key access roof to constitute open space. But whatever the vagaries of open space ratios are, they do require that there be open area around tall buildings to ensure light and air and movement. I think those are good things that define the character of our neighborhoods. We would sorely miss that space. And especially if you put that together with the idea that you could have, in effect, 20-foot plus 20-foot or a 40-foot rear yard donut instead of a 60-foot rear yard donut. You're going to have things that you're going to feel like the old honeymooners episodes where you can reach out the back window and touch the building across the way. I think those are very important current defining characteristics that should be preserved, at least in our district. Thanks.
I have an editing.
We just look at the, I think it really does reflect the tenor of this conversation and last week's conversation. The CB7 disapproval.
Could I make just a slight editing suggestion to that I think would get us there? Say disapproves proposals, particularly to the extent that it eliminates, and that sort of gets us the rest of the things that we don't totally understand or may not apply to us, but it emphasizes.
So there's a second part of this paragraph. Yeah, that gets to the stuff that doesn't really apply to us.
All right, I'll read it out loud. CB7 disapproves of the proposal to the extent that it eliminates the requirement that a building be situated no closer than 30 feet from the lot line. While intended primarily for low density areas and boroughs other than Manhattan, these proposed amendments would enable substantial infill within the donuts within blocks lined by low-rise buildings and townhouses. CB7 believes that the donuts are a unique and valued feature of the district, and although not a landmark, are worth preserving. CB7 also notes that, at least in the CB7 district, the expansion of townhouses, most of which are owner-occupied, is unlikely to create affordable or even market rate housing.
There's more. There's another section.
Yeah.
Can I ask, Mark, the open space ratio elimination, is that meant to apply citywide, or was that just in low density districts?
I'm not certain of that. I think that it's citywide.
If it's citywide, I think we should add a paragraph that objecting to that.
All right, I'll take on the
last open space. The last sentence says, other proposals designed to increase housing low density areas are generally approved by CB7, subject to the finding of the community boards more directly affected.
I don't think we agree with that.
He has something to say. Okay,
All right.
open space ratio is a height factor concept. So if you get rid of open space ratio, it also means you got rid of height factor zoning. And height factor zoning is actually the zoning that you're talking about for 200 Amsterdam, and you're talking about for the nursing home and the Chetwood site. So they're tied together. So that's it. We now use lot coverage, generally speaking. And while we're on this paragraph, I just want to say, not only are we doing they're arguing 30 to 20, but they're also talking about reducing courtyards from 120, right, from 1200 to 900, which sorry,
right,
which is real. 1200 square foot courtyard is pretty damn small. 900 is really absurd.
It sounds like this group wants to get rid of the last paragraph.
Yes.
And you want to add content on the other things disapproved of, and then why, so the rationale is clearer, right?
I agree. I think we should, and people have said some things about that. Well, definitely emphasize 20, but I have a completely different editing thing or question. Richard, I don't know why you said, and it's a little further, it's not on the screen now, while these are not landmarked. Most of, or a great many of our areas containing our donuts are landmarked. There are there's limited review, but frequent review of
Klari, let me stop you for a second, maybe clarify that. What I meant was that the donuts are not landmarked, not the buildings.
entirely true.
So I'll clarify the language, but that was what I meant to say.
Well, but we, we review rear yard extensions all the time. We didn't used to. Because for the most part, they are not visible from a public way, but now we do all the
Correct.
time. So I would just take that out, period, because I don't think it is correct or adds anything. It's-
Fine,
we
no
care about
problem. No problem.
landmarked or not.
And now
Okay.
it's been clarified.
It's a good,
Thank you.
that's a good edit. That's a good edit.
Whether landmarked or not.
There you go.
Take it out.
Great.
And a lesson.
By the way. Sorry. I just want to point out, as you can all see, many of the edits, the very good edits, this original draft were by Jami. So we owe her a thanks, debt of gratitude.
And and we ask somebody, since it reflects the conversation that appears to be a consensus, to draft language for the rest of the items that are objected to. We've really only in our disapproval talked about the 30B and some of the adjustments to townhouses and so on. But there's nothing about the open space particularly.
Right.
Who's best qualified?
And the FAR minimum piece.
Not on your committee, but I volunteer.
A volunteer, Mark, and he's volunteered himself.
Mark, while you're at it, if I can impose.
Yeah, please.
Take a look at the reduction in courtyard size, because we may want to add that too.
Got it.
Yes, let's do that.
We done.
What about distance between windows?
That's the same problem.
I know, that's why it should be part of this.
Also going to from 70% to 80% lot coverage on interior lots is a problem.
Well, I mean,
But that's the 20-foot.
yeah, but I mean, Louisa and Ira are bringing up other examples that were not presented to us that we haven't talked about because we got such a selective and cursory summary of what all this stuff is. And they've done more homework than some of us have.
Well, let's finish up with what they gave us. So,
but if we are silent about other bad things that you guys have ferreted out here.
Let's finish this, and then we might consider adding more.
who said on the smaller shared housing that
We haven't gotten it.
you had to have your own bathroom?
Roberta.
I agree with her.
I do too.
Yeah, they could be shared kitchens with a hot plate. But really, if you wanna have dignity, I think people need to have their own bathrooms.
I don't think,
No matter how small.
so my background was the director of the SRO law practice. And I worked there for many, many years. And it really, those SROs with shared bathrooms and kitchens provide a decent and affordable living space for people who would otherwise be homeless.
Yes.
And really interesting. And, I spent a lot of time inside those places. And I think that people who don't understand that it provides family, it provides comfort, it provides a lot.
Absolutely. Saralee, how would that new proposal that would allow the creation of new dwelling spaces that have shared bathrooms, how would that be different from a bunch of kids or whoever they are, sharing an apartment where, there's one bathroom? Every junior relative of mine has lived in Brooklyn in the last few years, and they have an apartment, maybe have 3 things that are called bedrooms, and it's got a kitchen, it's got a bathroom. So what does this do for, how does that relate to that?
So it brings people out of their rooms. They live alone. They have community. They have a shared responsibility in the kitchen. It makes a life for people who otherwise might not have it. It also provides housing for other people like students who are just getting out of high school or college and are starting their first jobs. It really provides a lot of options for various groups of people who don't have options. And could never afford studio apartment or one.
Right, and since I know so well, and also having done the big study on SRO housing, we came, the community board too, came to learn that for a while they thought it was inferior, the public did. And so they were doing away with it. More recently, there's an awareness that it is a housing form when operated decently and well is a very good one. And so there actually is another kind of movement now for SRO housing in a very well constructed and good way. And it's important to continue that in the best fashion.
So should we approve that set of provisions around group housing and I'm not sure the other.
Can we go put it in something with separate bathroom? If you have areas.
It increases the cost tremendously and.
I know it does, but what do you need?
Sorry, can I head on to the basic?
Consensus.
I would just ask if anybody has any sense of whether, if this were put into effect, we get any of it in CSL.
We'd get what?
We'd get any of this in our district.
Of course.
We had.
You do what?
Because
I know you do it.
Yeah.
isn't there a significant move?
But market rate.
Isn't there a significant move for the continued creation in a better way of SRO housing? By which, with that characteristic, there have been constructions of some of the better SRO housing as compared to years ago. It is a form of housing that might not be for everybody here, but for many, it can work. And well, if it's done legally and with high maintenance.
I also add, so I know of a lot of cases where like nonprofit developers have gone to take over old SRO buildings. And because of current HPD requirements, they've been forced to like look at the cost to add a bathroom to each unit. It's made it so cost prohibitive that they don't end up doing the conversion. So this relaxes those requirements and allows like nonprofits to take over existing SROs, be able to like finance them with HPD financing to make more affordable housing. I think we could see it in our district.
Okay, yes, thanks. Yeah, that's important. Okay.
So we should note that we support that set of provisions.
Yeah.
Talking?
What's our time frame?
Are we going to discuss talking?
Why would we?
We're 67.
We're against it.
Well, we're against it, but that means it's for.
Oh, that's their problem, isn't it?
But that's-
When you go into object to parking in the driveway or driving on Broadway.
Oh,
Parking in your.
Bad one.
Time to go home.
Yeah.
Well, during rush hour, it's parking on the parkway.
yeah. Yeah, you've got a ULURP to do, but it's a really quick one.
Okay.
Oh, Lord.
Which one is it?
Hold on, I got an answer for you on your Lincoln Square question.
Yeah.
They took it out. The 60% has to be below 150. It's on
Okay.
page 939 of the
I
annotated.
take it we all object to that.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
969, that's easy to remember.
939,
939?
yes,
It's a quick reader.
539.
yeah.
He didn't start at page 1.
Oh, you bet I did, Richard.
No, I mean tonight.
I meant tonight.
What's the ULURP?
It's
Go ahead.
okay, it's the Belnord building, like right across the street on 87. It's just like, they're changing the use of, the bottom floor. Here, I can get it up. I think Jesse only put it on the agenda yesterday because we only got notice.
But we need to move it.
Yeah.
Oh, what is it?
Here, I'll show you. It's,
Bank.
they didn't allow a bank space there, which wasn't fully clear to me why. Let me share my screen.
Something about the footage.
Is this the PC Richards?
The maximum street wall
It's the old
Banana
Banana Republic.
Yeah.
Their bank.
Okay,
You can see like the project brief here.
It's hard to read.
and it's tight, it's like it's coloring.
Permit reuse of the old Banana Republic space by a bank.
Okay.
That's the deal.
That's the deal.
Okay.
Do we know how big? Yep, it is. This is the rezoning that CB7 passed back in 2013. This is the same thing with the small storefronts on Columbus and Amsterdam, and the only thing that hit Broadway was the width of banks.
Right.
So is this within the? With the.
No, this
would violate that.
This would expand beyond it, but I think it's only about 40 feet, right? It's not the full half a block that we used to object to back then, right?
Right.
So this is exactly what Louisa was talking about before in terms of the process. It's a commission, is it chair authorization, I think it's called. This would not create the 100-foot wide billboard for a bank that we used to object to, for example, the Chase Bank down at 62nd Street and Broadway. That was the driver of this zoning. So I think. So,
Okay, any further discussion?
So if I could just ask, is this exactly the same storefront size? It was a Gap retail.
That's the other side.
Banana
Banana,
That's
part of Banana Republic, I think.
There were two
Starbucks,
different Banana Republic.
Yeah, that's, so it's not even the size of the old Banana Republic.
But it's bigger than allowed right now.
Right,
Okay.
and it's only been empty since.
Which bank is it?
That's.
Many years.
Can we vote? Can we move on?
Do we know which?
but if I may, the requirement of the zoning, the amendment of the special commercial overlay required that there not be more than one of these on the block, and I'm pretty sure there is not. So it also clears that hurdle of the zoning. I'm sorry, I would have studied up on this if I knew it was on.
Call the question.
I think it's,
Let's call the question.
I think it's banks on corners, but I agree with Mark that I think it's only clear.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Actually, I have a complaint, that Richard needs to recuse himself on this one. Because, Axtel owns the building. I've been kind of lobbying to bring that
They own the retail, they don't own the building.
up to Richard. Or defer to Richard, but, I had to bring it up.
No, it's,
I think it's.
if a person wants to recuse himself, he recuses himself. It doesn't require approval.
Well, do you recuse yourself, Richard?
Me?
See?
I don't recuse myself, no. I don't have any relationship with Axtel other than that we are by coincidence investors in a project with no relationship to each other. We're a lender. And I think that Axtel is too, but I can't imagine how voting on this building would create a conflict.
Who's the we, Richard?
Who's we?
We meaning my firm's pension.
It's pretty remote. Let's go.
Well, that will have to be disclosed at some point.
Yeah,
so
I'm going to
everyone-
disclose it. I'm also going to ask for a ruling by the Conflict of Interest Board.
Smart.
But I'm reasonably certain in my mind that there's no conflict.
Okay, so
And you're quiet.
do we have like a unanimous vote? Is that-
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it passed.
I'm sorry.
Checking.
Banana Republic.
Folks might. So I'm going to say thank you and good night.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
There's one more thing on the agenda, and I'm hoping this is really fast because it's a really good thing. We've been asked to support the budgetary increase in HPD's capital plan for neighborhood pillars and open door, two affordable housing programs. One had been defunded in 2020, but it's a previously existent program that's for preservation and rescues distressed buildings. And then Open Door allows new construction for shared equity projects for low income housing. And both of these would basically increase the capital funds by 500 million a year for HPD, which is like a 17% increase, and they had been previously cut. I think this is the core of the non-market effort, and
Nonprofit housing.
yeah, it's nonprofit housing, and I think this is something that would bring affordable housing to our district, unlike some of the other things we've just discussed. So can we vote on it?
Call the question.
Are you in favor of more affordable housing?
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay, it passes.
Okay, and non-board members, yes. That's it.